Hello and welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast. In this podcast, we talk to influencers so that you learn from the best. I'm your host Punit Bhatia. I help business and privacy leaders to create and deliver strategies for privacy compliance and trainings. Before we start, a quick reminder that the opinions and ideas shared in this context are not legal advice. If you need advice, you should contact a professional with your specific context. So let's get started. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have a special and unique guest. He has been the vice president of ISACA. ISACA is a research foundation and he was involved in early days in early 2000s. He's a professor at Solvay Business School. He's an academic director for data protection and masters in IT management for executives. He is also the CEO of Ataya and Partners. He delivers consulting on data protection, cybersecurity and IT matters. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor George Ataya. Professor George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. I'm delighted to be here.
Thanks. So tell us, you've been long in this journey. Where did privacy fit in and how did you get into privacy from all this IT, cybersecurity and ISACA world?
Well, Punit, I started in the 1995 period to be advising the European Commission. I was part of the IBAC, InfoSec Business Advisory Group, supporting the European Commission during that period where information security was very in its early stages. And we started at that time to be involved with privacy. It's at that same period that the directive was the European Directive on Databases, as we called it at that time. And in the 2000-2002 period, I have been involved in writing the body of knowledge for CISM, Certified Information Security Manager credential. And it's surprising to see today that there are 50,000 people certified with our credential. And I have been involved also with all those issues related as well as privacy, as confidentiality and other domains of information security. I have been also advising organizations at that time in relation to how can we ensure that we are managing adequately the privacy for the personal data that we handle. We recently have been contacted, recently in the 2016 period by the Belgian Privacy Commission, the predecessor of the Data Protection Authority. And they said to us, you have a lot of education in the domain related to risk management, compliance, IT transformation, digital transformation, etc., information security. Why don't we add that layer that is related to privacy, the legal part at least of it, and creating a new education. That's how we work for something like 1 year to develop, little less than 1 year, to develop the body of knowledge, identifying what are those skills and competences that are required for a professional GDPR, professional DPO to master in order to be able to effectively accomplish his or her activity. And we have been building that, and we launched that education that is running at Solvay from that time.
I think I'll come to that because you have those 5 steps on which how to see privacy 360 degree or holistically. But to start with, how do you see privacy or GDPR in one word?
Yeah, well, GDPR is, first of all, it is essential to understand that this is not something that is yet another regulation, yet another compliance requirement. It is a full system where we have to ensure that whatever we do, we are consistent, that within the complexity of our enterprise is a system that is made out of people, out of processes, out of the concept, methods, data transfer, applications, machines, etc. We have to ensure that whatever we do, we are implementing, embedding by design, as we typically say, the privacy, which means that we have to ensure that whatever we are doing, we ensure that any change to the organization, we are putting it in place. I consider that GDPR or privacy is a journey, it's not a destination.
Right.
So organizations should not consider that, okay, we have done it now, let's go to something else. No. You will be doing it all over the place, all over the time. You will be planning, building, implementing, running, and those planning, building, running will not stop at a certain time.
Exactly. It's a process, it's not a project.
Absolutely.
Good. And then we talk about privacy from organization standpoint, where there's a law that makes sense that we should comply, but then there are areas, there are geographies when there's no law, and why should a company look at privacy and why is it relevant for them even though there may not be a law?
Yeah. Well, first of all, an organization has an objective to ensure that they are bringing value and that they are doing whatever necessary to, from various points of view, ethically reaching objectives, avoiding risks, managing adequately resources. So where does privacy fit there? It's up to senior management.
Right.
And the what should not exist is an organization that has no idea about what we should do. I mean, keeping that to the decision of a DPO. By the way, the DPO should not be the decision maker by all means, as Article 39 mentions. So the worst that could happen is that senior management does not have an opinion on what is our position towards privacy, how far we should go. There is no 100% or 0%. There are shades of gray. What shades of gray should be in our culture, should be in our strategic plans, should be in our relationship with our clients and with our personnel. Those things cannot be left to technical people, to external advisors. They should be decided at a certain time in one sentence or in 5 pages, but should be communicated to organizations, personnel and clients.
So it's essentially a strategic choice which executives make, and then the strategic choices get implemented.
Absolutely. For example, should we spend on that initiative that will allow us to go one step further, or should we not spend on that? Who should decide?
Right.
If we don't have any strategy or any basic principle that would guide us into taking that decision,
right,
we will never be able to decide if that is important or not important decision, or is it a priority compared to other priorities.
Right. And where do you see the role of a DPO in facilitating this buying, this executive sponsorship?
Yeah. Well, the DPO, in my opinion, is simply and only the catalyst. The person, she or he, should ensure that whatever is happening within that organization, by ignorance or by absence of adequate risk management, absence or adequate persuasion, absence of adequate conducting and accomplishing and finishing a task that is required for privacy, they should ensure that that is happening. They should ensure that nothing is missed, and if it is missing, okay, it's not my fault, it's not my problem. At least I have, as a DPO, to ensure that my management or whoever process owner should know about that, consider the impact and the result of that, the consequences of that, and take action. That's where a DPO and what the DPO should, in my opinion, be doing most of the time.
No, that's fairly true. It's for the organization or the CEO to take accountability, and the DPO is there to fulfill or help him fulfill the responsibility.
I always say that we read probably 13 times the word DPO in a GDPR text, and we read 400 and more times the process owner. So the process owner is, the controller is the key person, right, to ensure that we are doing what is necessary. Yes, the DPO is important in that picture. The DPO is the invention, if I may say, right, mainly of the GDPR, while it existed in France and other countries. But we should ensure that the DPO is not the decision maker, should not be the decision maker, no, in order to ensure that she or he are doing the effective job. They should not be decision maker.
Right. And I think in the small or mid-sized businesses, a DPO may not even exist. It's then the responsibility of the executive to make sure his or her business is privacy compliant.
Yeah. What we do, we have a lot of organizations that are a tiny organization, small and middle-sized, or rather small-sized organizations. And there we ensure that the senior management, the senior manager in that situation, is playing the role of a DPO while, from the point of view of knowing what is required.
Right, and I think that's where the nuance is. When you and me say DPO, it's not the DPO by law, it is the privacy's point of contact. Absolutely. In the organization.
Absolutely.
Because most people, what they do is they confuse it, and then they say, I'm the DPO. You're not the DPO, you're the privacy, call it champion, privacy spot, privacy expert, but you're not full-time privacy professional.
I call it, absolutely, I call it the privacy conscience of the organization.
Privacy conscience, that's a nice word. Okay, then privacy compliance is a challenging topic. And from an organization perspective, what challenges do you still see even after a few years of GDPR and even after CCPR almost being here? It's a few months only. So how do you see those challenges and what can be done?
Well, the challenges are almost still the same. Beyond the fact that we know what is to be done, we took advice from our external lawyers, legal counsel, experts, etc. We still do not know how to implement it, because implementing privacy, embedding, as I mentioned earlier, that privacy concept within that process, within that application, within that data transfer or manipulation, within that relationship with our supplier, with that relation in that product that we offer as a service, including that deals with personal data, having privacy across all those operations is a huge challenge. The question is, how much are we on top of our enterprise architecture? How much are we aware of the mechanism of that application, of that service delivery, and how much have we been looking at the different dimensions that are involving the privacy? Beyond the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that we know what we have to do from the legal point of view, that's nice. How to do it then? How to implement it? This is the major challenge.
But you always talk about looking at privacy from a holistic perspective,
Yeah.
and you have that layered mechanism. So could you describe us what are the different perspectives with which you need to look at privacy or privacy compliance?
Yeah. Well, if we look at the enterprise architecture, which is business processes, different processes, data that are essential for those business processes, services that are essential to deliver data that to make those business processes function. For example, I am human resources department. I have various human resources business processes. I deal with a lot of data, salary data, payroll data, personnel data, training data, evaluation data, etc. I have a lot of services, external or internal, that are available online through the cloud or built into on our server. And we have applications, we have infrastructure, hardware, we have replication of data. On every level of that architecture, we have to be aware what is to be done, what is to be strictly done, what is to be loosely done, what is to be should be done in the future. And all those are issues that are quite important.
Absolutely. And then when we talk to organizations, there are two perspectives. Some of them look at it as a law, saying we have to comply with the law. And some of them look at it as a management issue, so we need to manage the risk. And then there are others who look at it as competitive differentiation.
Yeah.
So where do you see the organizations are moving, and what is the advice for somebody who's starting in their organization?
Yeah. Well, we notice on the market that organizations that consider that as a competitive edge are obviously going forward. We see those financial services organizations, those organizations that are dealing with personal data on a large scale. It's for them life or death. They cannot continue working otherwise, which means that they have to implement adequate compliance. For those others that are probably less concerned, involved, or impacted most of the time, we see that they are delaying. However, in some sectors of activity, I'm not going to mention the health sector or other sectors that are public services, we consider that although privacy is essential, they may not have the budgets, the means, spare the effort to implement privacy. Which means that we have to evaluate how much are we serious about it, and if we are not serious about it, what compensating controls could we put in place in order for us to limit any risk of breach or any risk of major damage in case of breach.
So essentially assess the risk and then take risk-based decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's good. And those were the challenges from an organization perspective. But then even the qualified people like us, the DPOs, they still to face challenges in execution of their responsibility. Yeah. So what are some of the challenges people are telling you?
Yeah.
And how are you recommending them to solve that?
Yeah. A major issue is the relationship between DPOs and the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
The subordination relationship between the DPO and whoever she is or he is reporting to. The competences that a DPO should or must or has effectively in order to implement their activity. All those are major challenges,
Right.
and I think that we should address all those challenges: the reporting, the positioning, the competences, and following on that, what is my plan as a DPO? How can I serve my organization? What is the day in, day out activity?
Yeah.
What is the day in, day out change? What is the day in, day out plan? Awareness creation, strategy discussion with my senior management,
Right.
management briefing, awareness to my clerks or my junior staff, etc. All those are activities that should be planned and could not be invented from a day or improvised from a day to another.
Right. And then one of the challenges we see is when privacy is becoming more and more technical, because you need to automate it, and in technology there are things like cookies, and some of our DPO colleagues are legal colleagues, they don't understand. So how do you see that bridging happening? Because I had once somebody who was saying they should learn to code, at least know how to code. Now that's another extreme, but what's your view on how do they bridge, how do they get into the technological side of it?
Yeah, if 100 DPO, on 100 DPO, only 2 or 3 may one day learn how to code, even 10% may learn one day how to code, what will we do with the others? In my opinion, the responsibility for effectively implementing the change, the responsibility for controlling the change, the responsibility for defining, planning, implementing the change should not be the responsibility of the DPO.
Okay.
Then the question is, how can they then verify that it is effectively done? It is simple. It is the same as for any senior manager who is not an expert, who is not technical expert, who is sitting on a time bomb, and that person sitting on a time bomb should know that her organization is taking major risks. How can a CEO or how can a DPO or how can a CFO be sure that her organization is safe? Simple. We have built, and I'm delighted to have been involved with ISACA and with similar organizations who built assurance practices. I should obtain buy assurance as anybody buys security, as anybody buys digital transformation.
Right.
Buying assurance meaning that asking some neutral, reliable people to ensure that we are doing what is necessary. And I could not, like any CEO cannot herself or himself ensure that they can master and check everything.
Yeah.
But in that situation, they have to identify what is the black hole that they couldn't perceive and how to buy assurance for that domain.
I think that's a very good example. Act like a CEO and manage rather than become an expert in each and everything.
Which is impossible.
Which is impossible, of course, because already DPO needs a lot of skills and it's difficult to have all of them. And if we add technology onto it, it becomes a mission impossible.
Exactly.
So then, privacy is about people. And when we talk about people, what are the critical success factors for somebody in a privacy profession to be successful?
Yeah. Again, similar with what you mentioned earlier. What I have to do? What is expected from me? What principles? What objectives? What purpose of my activity? And based on that, what are the critical success factors for me succeeding that activity? Mm-hmm. What should I do in order to ensure that my activity is effective? Mm-hmm. Is this in line with what is expected from me? Because I may have different opinion than my CEO, my chief legal officer, etc. I have to identify my plan, my activity, my objective for the coming years or coming year, mm-hmm. and I have to check it, verify it, validate it with my management, mm-hmm. because at the end of the day, my CEO is the ultimate responsible for privacy activities, which means that I have to check with my CEO what is required from me. I have to check with my direct manager to check what he is expecting from me.
And I think that's where the role of a DPO becomes interesting, or sometimes not so interesting, because on one hand you're supposed to advise the CEO, but on the other hand you're supposed to take advice on which direction the organization is headed and where you want to take privacy. Yeah,
this is the struggle that exists since the beginning of the creation of the enterprises, in my opinion. Imagine 50, 100 years ago, a CFO, financial officer, has to advise management but inspire from them. The IT manager, the CIO has to say to management, we could invent a new product by putting those together, by creating a new concept thanks to that technology. By the way, tell me what you want from me. So it is always a feedback, a double feedback.
Right.
We can never imagine nowadays with the complexity of organizations that we are dealing with, give me orders and I'm going to execute.
No.
I'm going to inspire you to give me orders, to inspire you, to give me instructions, and then I will be ensuring that you are probably implementing what I inspire you to do. And that's how senior management can be effective today. Senior management are as effective as the people working with them are bringing them insights, ideas, inspiration, and effectiveness in implementation.
So essentially, it's a feedback loop. Don't expect you will tell them to do it or they will tell you to do it. It's a two-way process.
Exactly.
That's interesting. And what advice would you give then to the young professionals who are coming up, the law students and so on, and they want to get into data privacy field? So what should they do?
Then privacy is an interesting objective, and some people are really philosophically motivated into getting into this domain. So I really invite those young graduates, whether they are graduate in information security, IT management, or legal, or any process management where it involves that involves privacy. I invite those to inspire from the logic, from the spirit of the privacy, not from the realization and from the what it is exactly. I repeat. I invite those to inspire from the spirit of what the privacy requires, and if they are very much adhering with that spirit, then I'm confident that they will find the way to first evolve their ideas about what is privacy in my organization, and how can I better serve my organization. So I will help not to focus on issues, implementations, projects that are not essential, but I will ensure sometimes with something that does not cost a lot, we can reach much more privacy than with huge projects that are costing a lot of money, using a lot of technology, but not bringing us a lot forward.
Absolutely. And then there are small businesses. They always used to struggle with finances and needed to put their money where the need is. But with Corona and pandemic, things are changing even more. And the GDPR or any other privacy law doesn't make a distinction on the size of a company. So everyone needs to be compliant. So what advice would you give a small business owner who has maybe say 5 to 50 people, something like that? They certainly don't need a DPO. I'm not talking about a hospital or a clinic because that's different. What advice would you give them, say, do this, or how can they help themselves?
Again, start small. Identify your privacy data protection objectives for the coming year. Identify what changes can effectively bring me forward without major investment, without major cost, without major call on major experts, high-level experts, expensive experts. We have managed with tens of organizations to book few days a year to ensure that they are implementing privacy and information security simply by focusing on some of the activity. We have structured step by step the different steps that are required to implement information security and privacy, and we guided those SMEs to implement what is necessary. Day here, day there, and on 1 year they progressed very well. At the end of the year they produce their report, identify what is still missing, and plan for the next year, and it managed very well. They managed very well, and that many of them avoided having to hire a full-fledged security expert or a DPO professional, simply by calling on external experts that are guiding them through that journey.
Interesting. And as part of your consultancy, you also support security and privacy. And where do you see the interrelation or correlation between security and privacy?
Many of my colleagues, my fellow consultants working with in our teams, focus very much, as always, on risk management. What is what we have? After an initial assessment, we conduct short risk assessment on what is what is missing, what we should do, what we should not miss at the end of the year, and we focus our activity, we prioritize our activity on what is to be done effectively this year, what could start this year but probably be implemented effectively in the coming years, and based on that we identify what is the typical budget that is needed, and based on that we implement what is required.
So you don't look at security or privacy, you look at security and privacy, but from a risk dimension.
I would like to say it differently. I would like to say that at the end of the day, we have series of business objectives.
Right.
That some of them require more security, some of them require more continuity, some of them require more confidentiality, some of them require much more data protection and privacy. And the issue is that from those business objectives, we identify what we call alignment objectives. Which one require what kind of alignment on confidentiality, integrity, privacy, etc. And then all that will bring us into a funnel where we have the end projects that have to, and the changes that have to be implemented.
So essentially it's Anne Kawakian's goal, basically privacy by design. You look at the business objectives, set your goals in function of business objectives, and then chalk out your risks and the plan for.
Yeah, I absolutely. I was talking with organizations recently that define what is the project to be implemented, and then they launch that project, they commission that project, they implement that project, it costs a lot of time, a lot of money, and then they discover at the end of the day, why do we need that? And then we don't trace that back to a major business requirement, whether it is strategic, tactic, or simple change management requirement. And it's a pity that we would be doing anything related to data protection, information security, even digital transformation that is not directly linked to any business requirement.
Very interesting. It was wonderful to have you, but in a sense of time, if there was one final message for the audiences, what would that be?
It is, if I'm motivated with privacy, what is that I have to do? And if I'm not motivated, who should in my organization ensure that privacy is really implemented? This is from the organization point of view.
Right.
When I'm working in an organization point of view, from the personal point of view, I think that all those competencies that are required for a data protection officer, a GDPR professional, are required for anybody. Right. I need to protect my data. I need to ensure that that service I'm using is protecting my data. So everybody should know about the legal requirements, my rights, as well as the implementation requirements. So those that I mentioned, the 5 domains of competencies that are needed for mastering privacy should be known by everybody on different grades, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody needs to know the 5, but not master all the 5.
Absolutely.
That's true. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you,
yes,
what's the best way? Of course, they can turn up at Solvay, but what's the other best way?
That's the best way. The best way going to Solvay. And by the way, our classes are starting soon. Find me on LinkedIn, Ataya, Ataya on LinkedIn. LinkedIn/Ataya, you will find me directly. Right. And I will be delighted to respond to any question that I may have through you. Punit, thank you very much.
Thanks, George.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure having you.
Thank you, Punit.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. This was Professor George Ataya, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked this effort. Please do click like, comment and share. It is okay if you did not like it. Please still do make a comment and share with us what we can improve. If you have suggestions, ideas for guests, or you want to have your question answered, please email me. My email is info@punitbhatia.com. You can also share this with others, and if you do so while tagging me in, I will personally thank and acknowledge your contribution in coming episodes. Thanks once more and look forward to seeing you back. Till then, stay safe, stay blessed and stay happy.